I'm just trying to start the live stream. Be going in another minute here. All right. Good evening, everybody. It's 8 o'clock on Sunday night, and this is the OMARC Science and Technology Net. Now, first, let's pause and make sure there is no emergency traffic. All right, sounds like we're all clear. I'd like to welcome everybody to the third edition of our new Sunday Night Net. My name is Neil, and I am W2NDG Whiskey 2 November Delta Golf. Here at 8 o'clock on Sunday nights to discuss science and technology in general, and sometimes how they apply to radio and ham radio specifically. You are hearing this net over OMARC's WA2 MJM repeater coming to you from the heights of Woodstock, New York. And you do not have to be a member of OMARC to participate in this net. However, we always do encourage it. We're a friendly club. We'd love to have you. Let me drop. This is a directed net until I say otherwise, which means I will call on you. But if you do have a comment, please say your call sign and the word comment. Everybody will check in. And as always, I always ask Jim, my sidekick, K2BHM, to check in first and say any messages that he has. And we are also live streaming on YouTube. I have the link again up on my Facebook page. But it is, if you need to find it, you go to YouTube and search for OMARC, O-M-A-R-C, Science and Technology. Jim, are you out there? Please come now.
I'm here. Good evening, Neil. K2BHM here. And let me start off saying that this is a fun net. We're here to enjoy it, transfer some information back and forth. People out there are going to be at all different levels, anywhere from a high school to a PhD level, with various different areas of interest and experience and so forth. And we welcome everybody to chime in and give their experiences, and also ask us questions if there's something you don't understand. It's, like I say, a fun net. Let's make it happen. Back to you, Neil.
All right. Thank you, Jim. And thanks for checking in. Let me talk about tonight's subject real quick before we take check-ins. I've been wanting to enter into this by walking around our subject of radio. And at first we wanted to find out what everybody wanted to talk about, and we got some really good information on that last week. The first week we started out simply talking about what science and technology actually mean and what they mean to you. Tonight, and I kind of gave a preview of this, I want to start getting what I refer to as elemental, which means I want to talk about some very basic concept of science. And then by the time we're done, we'll apply them to how they relate to radio. Let me drop. So in order, we're going to start with space. Somebody's warning me I have the wrong date on the title. We'll fix that in edit. Space can mean a number of different things. So we'll get into how we're approaching that. The next subject will be time. And time is definitely something that relates to what we do in our hobby. And then we're going to spend a night on physical elementals, let's say fire, wind or weather, earth, and sorry, I'm losing my place here because I have a distraction. Anyway, and once we get through that, we'll start on some of the topics that people chose, and then in a future one, we'll relate a lot of this back to radio. And a lot of this is driven by you as we get things that you want to talk about. Tonight's going to be a lot of information coming at you, but then we'll ask you for questions and what you think about everything. So let me drop. I do have a few people watching. At some point when we have everything set up as far as OMARC's own YouTube page and probably OMARC's social media accessible to me, we'll probably promote this in a number of different ways so we can get some more people involved from the surrounding area. But anyway, space. We're going to work on the word itself a little bit, and let me throw over to Jim, and he can elaborate a little more on what that word means to him.
Well, there is a lot of stuff going on there. Basically, the universe is composed of atoms, and atoms have a certain space between them, and that space varies depending on what you're talking about. In the situation of a gas, there's a lot of space between them. In a liquid, there's a little less space between them. In a solid, there's very little space between them. And now we start talking about all kinds of bonds and stuff like that, and so forth and so on. So it's a deep universe, and we can pursue it as deep as you want. Back to you, Neil.
All right. Sounds good. I did make some notes on basically where I wanted to go with this. Space, by definition, is, as far as I'm concerned, and this is not, I'm not reading off of Wikipedia definitions like I was last time. Space is 3 dimensions, X, Y, Z. That's how we can look at it. And it's the existence of an area in 3 dimensions that can be observed and sometimes traveled in. To expand on that, we know of occupied space and unoccupied space as far as ourselves. We occupy a type of space that's filled with matter in different forms, gases, liquids, solids, various combinations of those. And we can move freely through one of those gaseous elements, air. Sometimes we can move through liquid with assistance, but we can't really move through solids without serious hardware. Jim was alluding to something, and the nature of solid matter actually could possibly be that there is as much empty space in solid matter, like this desk I'm sitting in front of, as there is in a room filled with air when you look at something at the molecular level, which is what he was saying. So frequently when we get into science, the topic of science fiction comes up. And so the question is, could you travel through a solid? Rather ridiculous but funny movie, Buckaroo Banzai tackled that, right? But maybe someday they'll be able to phase different types of matter to be able to move in such a fashion. Empty space, which is something else, which isn't entirely empty, but we refer to that as the space outside of the type of space that we can occupy or live in. Let me drop. And this is when you say the word space, this is what people think of. Because of its level of emptiness, it doesn't have the properties that we rely on, either to live or even to do things that we normally would do. Empty space, or outer space, as we say, cannot transmit sound because sound is a product of molecules colliding into each other and vibrating. There isn't enough matter in space to carry sound. Combustion, all these wonderful space movies we see. Yes, there's a certain amount of gas that can aid combustion when like a spaceship or something blows up in these movies, but it's kind of unrealistic. What we're seeing is that you can't light a match in space. It's not going to burn. Convected heat is another one. The heat that we get from our sun is radiated heat, whereas convected heat relies on air currents or something similar, molecules actually relaying or transmitting heat to us. So it's another thing that doesn't exist out there. Let me drop.
Comment KB2VAH.
Go ahead, Jim.
For you folks that are trying to find it on YouTube, it's on there. Neil's on there. It's OMARC Science Technology Net, but he has the wrong date. He has March 14th, but click on it and it's there. Because I don't see any of you over here looking at it except me and some other gentleman.
Yeah, I'm not sure how I messed that up, but like I said, I can change it in edit. So anyway, let me go back to my notes here. So when we talk about the types of things that can occur in space, one of the things that does is electromagnetic radiation or radio waves. Those things do occur in space. And with that, we're able to do things in ham radio like moon bounce or meteor scatter, some really esoteric types of ham radio. But it's also what allows NASA to communicate with their manned and unmanned spacecrafts. So if that didn't work, things would be really hard when it comes to the space program. So this slowly leads into the subject of radio and basic radio, the nature of radio waves, how they exist, how they're modulated, demodulated, and that'll come up in the future. But right now, tonight, let's talk about space. Let's talk about inner space, the space that we occupy, the space that might exist within our space. I know that's a rather deep subject, but there's definitely a lot of people who concentrate on what holds solids together, what makes things actually work. And then we can talk about what's outside of our space. So, and as always, these topics are driven by you. And let me ask Jim for some comments, and then we'll take check-ins.
That wasn't me. Just to reiterate and give some substance to one of your previous statements. A solid is a solid. And back in the days when they started originally playing with lasers, a laser was a glass tube, very similar to a neon sign. And glass is a solid. And they would put helium and neon gas inside, and the mixture of those two gases in the right conditions would make a laser. And over a period of time, the helium was so small that it would diffuse out through the atoms of glass and decrease the concentration of helium in the sign so that it became just eventually a neon sign. So, lots of things to think about. Things that you think of may not be as they appear. Anyhow, back to you, Neil.
All right. If we're going to talk about metals, I have an interesting direction we could go in with this, definitely. But let's take some check-ins, and then let's see what people think about this topic, and if they have any questions, comments, or a direction they'd like to push the discussion in tonight. I am Neil, W2NDG. on the OMARC Sunday night Science and Technical Net with Jim, K2BHM. We'll take check-ins. Please come now with your name, your call sign, and your location.
KC2 UVP Mike Tivoli.
This is
November 2 Foxtrot, Zulu Charlie Tom in Fishkill.
here is KB2 GGF Matt in Kerhonkson.
This is KD2 MNR Mike in Poughkeepsie.
This is KD2 BAH Jim in Poughkeepsie.
This is AC2KV Mobile Chris, currently in New Paltz.
This is KD2 UEN Bill and Olson Park.
All right. Thanks for checking in. Let me drop and just call for any more. Anybody else like to check in before we start talking? Come now. All right. Thanks, guys. You've heard the basics of what we're talking about tonight. Yeah. And once again, going to the basics of the word itself. What is space? You know, we live in 3 dimensions. We're not a cartoon. And next week we'll talk about the 4th dimension of that, and how that relates to everything else. So let me start. And if you don't know where to go with this, that's fine. But tell me what you think about what you've heard so far, and what aspect of space interests you, whether it's inner space, outer space, the things we need to do to occupy spaces that aren't necessarily native to us. Think about subjects like that. So let's start with Mike from Tivoli. Mike, what are your thoughts tonight?
Thanks everybody for being in there and listening. It's not going to be a friendly entourage. A moderator has great privilege and great responsibility to control that, and you have this obligation to recognize who calls you. There should not be a second in command in the first command until the second in command takes the first command, and they don't step on the plebes that we are and wash us out, because I mean, who's in charge here on the audio, on the key, the push to talk button, when I don't know which boss to answer. It says in the good book, one should only have one master, and I will not come back onto this net until that is solved. And I know you have a privilege to answer queries and questions, but a lot of wind is a lot of wind, and I'm turning my radio off.
All right. Not sure how to respond to that, but we will move on. Tom in Fishkill, you're up next. Please come down.
Good evening, see. I don't know how I can follow that act. That was wonderful. Space, the final frontier. I mean, the interest in space, outer space travel, an interesting concept. Then you also talk about inner space, and I suppose on a theoretical level, there's space between molecules. So if you want to go through a solid and have the technology to arrange your spaces in the spaces of the solid object, it's not a far theoretical level. But interesting thoughts, and there's just two ways to go with it: microspace and macrospace. So they're almost two different conversations. That's all my input for tonight. This is N2F. Get back to that.
All right, thanks, Tom. And when we talk about that, is a solid really a solid? Well, like Jim said, yes, of course it is. I can bang my head on this desk and it's not going to go through it. I'm just going to get hurt. There was famous sci-fi movie with Donald Pleasance, Raquel Welch. Fantastic Voyage. That's it. And Fantastic Voyage was written as a movie script. It's by today's science standards kind of ridiculous. But what's interesting, and the reason why I'm bringing it up, is that Isaac Asimov, I believe, who was involved in the movie script and consulted on several things, wrote a sequel to it that was not made into a movie, but called, I think, Voyage 2. And in it, he does explore states that they're at where they were so miniaturized that they were starting to have issues with molecular action. It's hard to explain. It's definitely a book you'd have to read to understand what I'm talking about. But once again, science fiction is fiction. But when you have a scientist writing science fiction, which some of these guys are, they do get some interesting topics, which is definitely a subject for another night. Maybe realistic science fiction novels like The Martian, where most of the science is actual science. So, but anyway, it is an interesting thing to think about. Could we miniaturize matter? Well, I don't know. Probably not. But it's certainly entertaining. And gotta love Donald Pleasance as a villain. No cat this time, though. This is W2NDG on the Sunday night Science and Technology Net. I'm going to hand it to Matt in Kerhonkson next. Come on, Matt. Come on now, Matt.
Good evening. Matt, KB2, GGF here in Kerhonkson. Just listening, and the thing that immediately popped into my head when you said space was that the first to conquer living space was the Castro convertible. That's because I listened to too much radio when I was a kid. And I'm still doing that. It's very interesting to me at the moment to do with telemetry, which is a really vast topic, as they all are, but that's my only thoughts at the moment. Back to that, KB2GGF.
Who was the little girl in the commercials? Is that Bernadette Castro, who became head of parks for New York State at some point? Dealing with space again. I don't even know if Castro is still in business, but yes, it does bring back some memories. Jim, any comments so far on things? K2BHM.
Yeah, it's just something to think about when you talk about solids and liquids and so forth. It's all based on energy levels. When you have a glass of water there, it's pretty much all water, but what you don't realize is that some of it is low enough energy that it's ice, and other is high enough energy that it's steam. So this is why evaporation happens. It's the higher energy levels escaping. This is why when you sweat, you get evaporational cooling. So it's all an average. Things all kind of congregate together, and we'll explore it in future topics. Something to look forward to.
No, good points for sure. And two things that came to mind from high school chemistry. One is that you can observe what we're talking about because there are a number of liquids that can occupy the space within each other. And what I mean by that is there are liquids where if you take a cup of liquid A and a cup of liquid B, which is 8 ounces plus 8 ounces, and pour them together, you don't get 16 ounces of liquid. It's interesting, but I remember, them showing us that experiment and then showing us the notes and the math that allowed you to figure out what that volume actually would be. The other one I was thinking of is when the chemistry teachers go to the blackboard and show you why hot water can actually freeze faster than cold water. And that has to do with Jim's subject of energy. Let me just throw it back to him for a fact check.
Confirmed. And then also pressure has to enter into it too, because you go and put your beer in the freezer to get it cold quick, and you pull it out and pop the top, and when the gas releases, it freezes solid.
Yes, there's a lot of interesting things that come up when you deal with the basics of the states of matter. And I mentioned one of my favorites is something called the Slingshot Effect. And it is the reason why sometimes you'll find frost on your car when it's not below freezing out. Really cool effect. Anyway, let's keep on moving down the list here. KD2MNR, Mike in Poughkeepsie, and I said it right.
Yes, I believe you did, Neil. KD2MNR. I had some other subjects, but I'm not going to do them because you have a subject this evening. So, as far as space goes, the only thing I can think of is the movie Spaceballs right now. So, I'm just going to listen for a while before I need to go to bed and all that, but I'll let you know when I'm going to bed. And we'll talk to you guys in a little bit. KD2MNR.
All right, Mike, thanks. And I'd love to hear what your topics were anyway, please. Actually, let me know now what they were, and I'm going to write them down.
Well, I had something, pretty much just one, but I mean, you could go off on a tangent on a lot of this stuff. How technology is hindering life as far as memory, because since technology and the new phones and all that, how many phone numbers do you remember that you had to remember back before the cell phones and everything? And basically misinformation or wrong information on the internet, so that people walk around thinking that 1 and 1 is 3 because it said it on the internet. And also, somebody and I were talking the other day, and auto parts stores, everything is in the computer. You ask for spark plug for whatever, and they bring you a spark plug because that's the one that's in the computer, and you bring the spark plug home, and it has no business being anywhere near the motor that you're trying to put it into. And you bring it back and say, nope, not even close. Well, that's what the computer says. When I was a parts guy, I had to look stuff in books, and I got to the point where I remembered all of the part numbers for a tune-up for a Chevy 350 or any Chevy small block, because they're all pretty much the same. But somebody would come in and say, "Oh, I need a tune-up for my Chevy. It's a 350." I didn't even bother looking in the book or going to a computer because you couldn't go to a computer. I go to the shelf. I grab everything they need, and that's what they needed. Now everything is in the computer, and whatever it says in the computer, that's what they throw at you. So it's going back to this technology that is kind of hindering life or us or whatever it is. But I don't remember any phone numbers anymore either. I remember mine and my wife's. I don't even know what my kids' phone numbers are. It's Randy and Amber. So, that's about it. KD2MNR, back to you.
W2NDG on the OMARC Sunday night Science and Technology Net. It's a good subject in many different ways, and as we just work our way through this first and maybe a small second rotation, or at least for the late check-ins, we might throw some information at that. And you're right. There's definitely ways that it hurts us, but there's certainly a lot of ways that it helps us. And I probably have a lot of commentary on that. But all right, Jim, KD2VAH, your comments on space, inner space, outer space.
Well, like the rest of them, this is kind of taking me. I'm listening and I'm enjoying it very much. And I wouldn't mind eventually getting to hitting the satellite repeaters, things like that. I mean, but, and then of course too, I'm also going to go to my favorite, space, relativity, time, blah, blah. But otherwise, I'm enjoying it very much.
All right, thank you. And I just realized here that I broke a, not a rule, but a custom. It is customary to let the people who are moving through space while we're doing the net go first. And Chris, I'm sorry, I should have let you go first. AC2KV, come down.
It's quite okay. I'm driving, so I'm going to do more listening than talking, but very interesting topic suggestion there. And I, for one, have an interest in the space and the future of space travel. We were at the point where we've got technology, seems like we can get to Mars pretty easily, and what does the future hold? When are humans going to be able to travel in farther distances and stuff? So anyway, that's about it. And I really like Mike's suggestion. It's a good suggestion. And I'll send it back to you, Neil. I'll be listening here, AC2KV.
All right, thanks, Chris. And we have one more from the original check-ins. Bill, KD2UEN. You had great comments before for us, pushing things into a more esoteric direction. So I can't wait to hear what you're going to say tonight.
Well, I guess I'm a little bit, it was a surprise subject. From the first time Gene Roddenberry, I think, was the one, that brought about our thoughts of space and Star Trek and all that kind of stuff. But what I'm really interested in about space is what we put in it. Whether it's a parking space or what's between our ears or what's above our heads in the heavens and the space inside the earth and those things. And I think what I'm most interested in about space is what we can do with the space, how much we can fit into space, and those are my thoughts on that. So I'll give that back to you, Neil, and it's KD2UEN.
All right. Thanks, Bill. And yeah, I mean, there's so many different directions we can go in on this, but I'm kind of just covering basics before we move in other directions. That's all. And I appreciate everybody's comments so far. Let me throw it to Jim for any wrap-up comments before we take more check-ins.
Yeah, I was just kind of intrigued by Mike's comments about how we become so dependent on the machines and so forth and don't remember stuff. I still have a paper book calendar that I write my appointments in, and I remember important phone numbers in my head so that I don't need to look for something. God forbid you get stuck on the side of the road and you need to call a friend for help, and your cell phone's down and you got to borrow somebody else's. What's the number? Darn if I know. Anyhow, yeah, there's a lot to be thought about there. Back to you.
Oh, for sure. And I can definitely throw plenty of comments on that. That phone in your pocket is both a miracle and a hindrance in many ways. So yeah, I don't remember the numbers I used to. And there's a lot of things like that. There are people who have never looked at a map in their lives, but know how to use the navigator on their telephone. And the question becomes just basic sense of direction. Is Albany to the north? Is Hartford to the east? Just knowing those basic things. I grew up with maps. I can't imagine not knowing where things are, but the new generations are different with a lot of that. Part of what Mike was saying with the computers brings me to one of my favorite computing rules. And I do have, if we ever get into computers one night, I'll talk about the 3 cardinal rules of computing from me. But one of those is computers don't make mistakes. They amplify them. Think about that. All right. This is Neil, W2NDG, on the OMARC Sunday Night Science and Technology Net. And we're looking for more check-ins. If you'd like to check in, please come now with your call sign, your name, and your location.
Quick comment, KGBHM.
Go ahead, Jim.
You made me chuckle back, years ago when they put I-90 through Albany and connected up with 787 and all that stuff. When you came down to get onto I-90 from Colony, Albany, whatever, Route 9, you were faced with 2 signs. One said Buffalo and the other said Boston. And it didn't say east or west. So if you wanted to go to Schenectady, was that Buffalo or Boston? So many people got so confused. It was hilarious.
Oh, yeah. And, there were a couple of stories about people when I was in high school who were driving off to look at colleges, who were told either to go to the certain exit on the thruway or certain exit on I-87. And people who were intending to go to Syracuse ending up somewhere up in the northern Adirondacks and vice versa. It's a good idea to know where things are. We'll call for check-ins again. Anybody else want to check into the Science and Technology Net, and then we'll move on. Come now. All right. We can continue on this subject if everybody would want, or we can actually kind of wander over into Mike's topic, which I'm fine with. It's definitely something to think about. I've often, and I think both weeks that we've done this before, I refer to myself as an information addict. The internet, was probably one of the greatest inventions for people like me, and having it in your pocket is just amazing. My kids are always getting upset with me because they'll ask me basic questions sometimes when we're home. Like, what time does CVS open? Or what's the speed limit on 9W between here and Newburgh? I'm just drawing random examples, but my response to them is always, the world is in your pocket. Look it up. Jim?
I'm a little older than you. It was always the dictionary or the encyclopedia.
Comment, Katie, to BH.
Go ahead, Jim.
That dictionary. Oh, Lord, how many times have we all heard that comment? We'll go look it up in the dictionary. If I knew how to spell it, I wouldn't need to look it up in the dictionary. Oh, that used to drive me crazy. Well, people tell you, go look it up in the dictionary. Okay.
W2NDG on the Sunday night OMARC, Science and Technology Net. No, good point. We all grew up with, there was no internet until I was much older. But, we grew up with dictionaries and encyclopedias, library. I lucked out. My father, at some point when he was between jobs, before he started his own business, decided to sell encyclopedias. And usually when you sell encyclopedias, your first customer is yourself. So we had a complete set of Encyclopedia Americana on the shelf. I think like a 1967 or 68 version, which worked fine up to a certain point until I started, when I would write a report on a certain part of the world talking about countries that didn't exist anymore, or obviously those maps changed too. But yes, so we had a complete set of encyclopedias on the shelf. And also we had National Geographic going all the way back to, I think, 1950 with the indexes and the guides. So there was a lot of things I could do without even going to the library. And some of my local friends would come and take care of that. The internet has brought that into our homes. But it's interesting is like when you get into college today, and I went back to school a few years ago, they warn you about using Wikipedia. And is there someone out there who can come and tell me why you're not supposed to use Wikipedia for scholarly papers and articles?
KD2UN, comment?
Go ahead, Bill.
Because it's changed by the constituents of the Wikipedia. Anybody can add or subtract information to that, so you don't know what the source is.
Correct. And it can get humorous sometimes. Some of these science types will play little jokes on each other and, put little detractors in other people's Wikipedia pages. And it'll sit there until one of the editors realizes that there's misinformation and they'll pull it back out. But yeah, but some of my schoolmates would take that as don't use it at all, which isn't the case. It's great to find usable references because frequently the usable facts reference things that you can look up and find in your university's library or local library. So I wish Dave MQE was here. He'd have a lot to say on that topic probably. the misinformation, like Jim was saying about getting the wrong things, it's funny because sometimes people will always take what's on the screen as gospel, you know. So yeah, you know, no, that's the wrong spark plug, but they're sitting there telling you, no, it's definitely the right one, and you're looking at it, and you know, it has like 3 threaded ends or something ridiculous like that. I've had people argue with me about things their computer is telling them at as low a level as a McDonald's and as high a level as a university library. So the computers do need correct facts in order to give you correct information, but sometimes when you feed it misinformation, it multiplies. We can give plenty of examples of that. But does anybody else want to talk about Mike's suggestion that technology has kind of, in some ways, made us dumb, in other ways, made us very intelligent?
Comment.
Go ahead.
If you listen to the way people text nowadays with their IDKs and LOLs and stuff like that, and they carry that over into professional communications and so forth, things are totally unimaginably vague and ambiguous, and you have no clue what they're talking about. It's definitely dragged down the business world.
Well, that actually brings me off into a different direction real quick. Can somebody give me an example, maybe more than one example, of a change to the official dictionary? I mean, either a change to the meaning of a word that didn't exist in our vocabulary that is part of it now, or a word that may have changed, all because of the internet. There's a lot of examples, but I'll take one. Perfect. It's not just about meat. Any others? Hey, email in general, words like that, words associated with the technology. But the converse of that is when we use outmoded words to describe modern technologies that don't really fit, like the use of the term carriage return when we are involved in programming and text actions in programming. The word, the words in themselves, carriage return, refer to a mechanical, carriage on a typewriter going back. Dialing your phone. Nobody dials a phone anymore, but we still use that term. Hanging up your phone. You're not hanging up your phone. You're pressing a red button. There's so many things like that, and the existence of instant communication anywhere at any time is also changing the barriers between languages. It's another interesting thing that's going on, is that a lot of the modern words are the same across all languages. So anyway, anybody else have anything on Mike's topic? Can you tell me about an aspect of your life that works completely different because of the internet and other advanced technologies?
And to a position.
Go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, the cell phone, like you said, you have the world of information in your hands, but not being a fuddy-duddy or whatever, but you see kids like all my grandkids, they have their phones out playing games, instead of like talking to people or interacting, playing other games. sometimes it's good to keep them entertained, but how many kids have the phone and sit there and play games on it? So there's good and there's bad. The internet has a world of good information, and then of course there's a lot of spam on the internet now. So that happens as technology goes on. And to FCC back to that.
That's a very good point, and I started noticing that even before my kids were carrying phones, was that they were starting to communicate more and more at the time using chat apps, AIM and such, and they were starting to lose the ability to ask questions. And we had some interesting fights about that, because I can remember once bringing my daughter to a school event and asking her, when I was dropping her and her friends off, what time is this over? And she said, I'm not sure. I'll call you when I know it's about over. I said, no, I need to know what time this is over. And she said, can't I just call you? I said, no, go find an adult or an advisor, whoever is running this thing, and ask them what time it's over, and I will be here then. And she said, do I have to? And I said, well, you have a choice. You can go do that, or we can go home now. That's your choice. And I did that to them a lot, where I would push them, into becoming questioners, and to not be afraid to ask people questions out in the world. And that's, unfortunately, we've created a generation of people that don't know how to talk to people face to face. So there's definitely aspects of all of this that are good. And we're definitely producing generations of kids that are more capable of using technology and learning from it. And they are, as you look at the subjects and what we teach kids and how it's changed from year to year to year to year, they're definitely learning more than I did. And I learned more than my parents did. My parents learned more than my grandparents did. There's definitely a lot of interesting things you can do with that. But yeah, those are the negatives. We're taking the ability for people to physically socialize away. Let me drop for a moment. And that's a perfect time to identify. This is W2NDG, Neil on the OMARC Sunday Night Science and Technology Net. I do want to bring up something that Paul, AC2UQ, who I believe is in our YouTube channel, at least he was, brought up when Mike first brought up this subject. And he was talking about them looking at the way our memories and aging have been affected by the existence of computers and the internet and smartphones. I do want to, before I look into that and research it, maybe bringing it up on another night, I want to talk about the good that's come out of it. I think it's good to weigh both sides of this. I had a parent who went through stages of dementia, not necessarily Alzheimer's. They never diagnosed full Alzheimer's, but there were symptoms of both. And the recommended place was an Alzheimer's community that we found up in the Capital District area. And actually, this place was fantastic, and I was super impressed with it. And one of the things that they had, and I'm hoping that most of these places have this, were computer-operated stations. They were using software to help people with their cognitive abilities and exercises that helped their memories and helped them recognize things. I got to sit in front of it a couple of times and watch really smart programs, great stuff, and an example of that technology being used for good, being used to maybe repair some of the damage that we're doing. So let me throw it over to Jim for a comment.
Yeah, they say use it or lose it. It's good to keep active, keep your brain going, exercise it, which we're kind of losing. Technology is taking over thinking for us, and we need to say no. We need to think on our own, and logic and reasoning and exercise it, or you'll lose it. Good point, Neil.
Or for that matter, I'm not a gamer. I've never really gotten heavily into video games, either on the computer or on consoles. There's certain things I enjoy, but I'm not keeping up with it, let's say. But I do like puzzles, and I like things that challenge my mind and my reflexes. So I always have 2 or 3 things on my phone that I play. And it's usually, I do it to keep my reflexes and my powers of observation. And sometimes just to relax. It's good, when your mind is going in 18 different directions, to focus on something that makes you think. And what do I, simple stuff, physics games, even something as inane as Angry Birds does require a lot of thought to make it work correctly. And then some of this stuff you'll get a good laugh out of at the same time. But I keep a collection of them. And something as basic as solitaire is good for your brain. So keep that in mind. Anybody else have an example of maybe a skill that they've lost, not completely lost, something you're relying on technology maybe a little too much for? That was a double. Let's try again.
Sudoku to the list of things to do.
No, it's a good one. I know a lot of people who play it. That's one I never got into. And everybody has a head for different things. Mine was a game that was included with a lot of the Microsoft distributions early on. It exists in the Linux world too, called Tetravix, where you have the cubes with a number on each side. Similar to Sudoku, but slightly different. There was another comment in there other than Jim's.
Yeah, it's Matt, KB2, GGF. I always like the cryptograms, the word substitution puzzles. They were always fun. But just occurs to me that my time spent looking at the phone or online has been cut recently because after a long hiatus, I've gotten back into ham radio and I'm spending a lot more time listening.
That's a good point. And ham radio is an interesting topic when we talk about technology, because in many ways it's old school, it's classic technology, legacy technology, but there's so much more to it. One of the things that brought me to ham radio when I got in was its joining with technology and a lot of the technologies that I embrace both as a hobby and for a living. So, but it's a good point, and there is certainly a lot of listening to be had. God, it'll be this fall will be 10 years since I got my license, and I was a listener before that. I've always been into radio, but when there were things to listen to on shortwave, that's what I did, and learned very quickly that one of the fun things and informative things to do is when something happened in the world, I would tune around and I would get the British view, and then I would get the Canadian view, and then the Russian view, and at the time, 30, 40 years ago, the always hysterical Albanian view. It was one of the most wacky newscasts you could ever listen to. There's plenty to listen to. And even the things that you don't physically listen to, you can tune into various digital modes of communication and read the words on your screen. But good point. And sometimes those of us who love playing with ham radio turn off the computer, stop looking things up on QRZ, and pull out your oldest rig, maybe not even with a digital readout, and just talk to people. And that's a big part of what it's about. W2NDG on the Sunday night OMARC Science and Technology Net. We're at the 1 hour mark. I'm going to throw this open to any other. Well, let's see if there's any late check-ins first. So we'll do that first. This is W2NDG. And if there's any late check-ins to the net, please come now with your call sign, your name, and your location. All right, nothing heard. Let me open it up again one more time. If there's anybody else who wants to throw a comment in on either the subject of space and what intrigues you about what we talked about, or Mike's topic about the harm that technology can possibly do, and of course the good side of it too.
Comment, KB2VAH.
Interesting.
All right. Jim, VAH first. Go to.
Well, in my line of work, before I was retired, I carried a radio, commercial radio, whatever you want to call it. And pretty much those radios sound like the ham radios. Somebody's always talking, trying to get a hold of somebody by a number. Not so much by a call sign, a KV, but more by a number. So I got used to listening to it, and I could instinctively hear my number, even in the biggest rabble. Let me drop for a second. But I've also always listened to, and I don't know if any of you folks have ever listened to it, but you can find them on YouTube if you don't have an XM radio. The old CBS Mystery Theater, The Mysterious Traveler. To this day, I go to bed at night with a set of headphones in my ears, and I listen to one show, sometimes two. By then, I'm usually out, and I got to wake up the next morning to find out what happened. Who did the butler do it? And ham radio just fit in for me when I retired and couldn't do anything else. Let me drop for a second. So I sit here with my dual band radio on, the 10 meter on, my scanner on, listening, and my wife just shakes her head like, how do you distinguish between everybody? It's just something you can do. I don't know why. I guess we all do it. I just got to learn to remember call signs, that's all. Back to net.
Thanks, Jim. And great stuff, and we're glad to have you. Tom, FCC, go ahead.
And to FCC. Just want to say, I love Fantastic Voyage. I remember seeing it as a kid. Also, you brought back memories of listening to shortwave radio and then tuning into the other shortwave station newscasts and getting a little different angle. So that was pretty cool. Like every technology, there's pluses and minuses. Just got to hopefully keep it on the positive side. A lot of video surveillance and AI has the potential to go into the dark places. But good net. So back to that. Into FCC.
Well, thanks, Tom. Anybody else for a comment on any of tonight's topics?
KB2 GGF.
Oh, go ahead, Matt.
Yeah, I used to do some SWL when I was younger, and still do. What's left, like you say. But remember the number stations? Yeah, they're spies. That was always interesting. A series of numbers. But yeah, the aspect of technology, which hasn't changed much since ham radio started, is antennas. Yes, there are some reconfigurations and modeling innovations and so forth, but the actual physical antennas are pretty much what they were. Back to that.
Thanks, Matt. While you were saying that on camera here, I spun my magnetic loop around, which I'm sitting in front of again. Number stations. So Matt's heard them. Is there anybody else listening tonight that has actually tuned into and listened to a number station ever?
And 12Z6.
And there's Tom.
Yeah, turning around, I've listened to a number station for a little while. Not real compelling stuff.
No, but this whole subculture has risen up around it. And one of the funny things is number stations in pop culture. They show up here and there in television and movies. Fringe did an entire episode on number stations. And the more recent one is hilarious. Is there anybody listening tonight that has watched a show on Amazon called Truth Seekers? All right. Well, I'm going to recommend it. And I'll spoil one of the jokes for you, unfortunately, but I won't spoil the entire punchline of the series. What Truth Seekers is it's created by Nick Frost and Simon Pegg of Hot Fuzz and Shaun of the Dead, and of course Simon Pegg, who plays Scotty in the newer send-ups of Star Trek. Nick Frost is pretty much the lead, and it is a spoof on like ghost hunting shows. And in the first episode, he turns on the shortwave radio, which they incorrectly say is long wave, I think, in the show, but and puts a number station on. But the number station that he's listening to goes like this: 1, 1, 1, 1. And that's all it does until partway into it when it finally changes. But supposedly from him, it's been, for years, that's all it's been doing. Just a single digit. It's pretty hilarious for those of us that know what that is. Anyway, I don't think it's going to get any more seasons, but I do recommend watching the short. I think it's only like 8 or 9 episodes. It's definitely worth watching. It's pretty funny. Truth Seekers on Amazon. Anybody else have anything on any of these topics? And if not, we're going to end the formal net and just leave it to open discussion if anybody wants to hang out. This is W2NDG on the OMARC Sunday Night Science and Technology Net. Please come now with any additional comments. All right, Jim, any final words?
Nothing really. I think we've pretty much talked about everything that people want to talk about, and looking to see what happens when we open up the mic and open it up to whoever wants to talk about whatever they want to after the net.
All right. Well, thank you. And I think we're going to end things now, and I'll end the stream. If anybody wants to hang out, I am actually going to take like a 2-minute break once the camera is off, because nobody wants to watch me eat greens. but I'm going to get a little something to eat from my cooking before. So this is W2NDG on the OMARC Sunday Night Science and Technology Net. This is a net that occurs every Sunday night at 8 p.m. on WA2MJM, the repeater of the Overlook Mountain Amateur Radio Club. You do not have to be a club member to participate in any of our nets, but we do encourage you to join the club and become a part of the fun. You don't even have to live in the area. We'd love to have you. This repeater also operates 2 daily nets, one at 8:35 in the morning, referred to as the 8:35 on the 8:05. That is a very informal check-in round-robin net every morning at 8:35. At 6:30 p.m. every night, we have the OMARC Wellness Check-In Net, a net that was started to make sure when COVID hit that everybody's okay. We need to communicate. We need to check in our neighbors, check on our ham neighbors. And it's a net where we just come on and talk about what we're doing, what we did, and how we're feeling. It's a good idea to keep our spirits up and keep talking. Every Thursday night at 8 p.m., Dave, our club president, hosts the Thursday night OMARC net, which is also a technology-oriented net, usually driven by specific ham radio or electronics and computing topics, and also asking our members, what do you need help with? What do you want to know more about? What are you having trouble with? Dave runs a great net, sometimes into the late hours as subjects sometimes get pretty deep. But we love helping people out, troubleshooting, and teaching and making sure people know more about the subjects that we're covering. So, and that's it. I'm going to close the formal portion of the net now and end the stream. This is W2NDG on the OMARC 8 o'clock Sunday Science and Technology Net. Returning the repeater to casual use. And like I said, I'll hang out if anybody wants to chat for a little bit. All right, I'm ending the stream.